Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my good friend, champion for freedom from Ohio, Mr. Jordan. There's a lot to talk about here today, but I have to comment on what he just led in with and this violence that we supposedly all decry. It's a bit of a double standard, isn't it? Because these care pregnancy centers are a vital institution in our country. They're in all 50 states. There are over 2,700 of these centers doing vital work every single day. They help millions of American women every year. They employ and work with over 10,000 medical professionals. And you know what their singular goal is? It is to help women who are in difficult pregnancy situations, to help the women and to help them care for their unborn children. Who in the world could be opposed to that? But you know what? Senator Elizabeth Warren spoke for a lot of our colleagues on the other side last week. She came out and shrieked they needed to be put out of business in her state. They needed to get rid of these centers. It's just incredible. And in the debate on the rule here on this floor in the last couple of hours, I went down the litany, Mr. Jordan, of all those 50 occurrences, at least the ones we know about, and there are more, where violence has been perpetrated against these centers. These people who are doing extraordinary work down in the trenches to help their fellow man. I ran out of time. I could not list all of them and all of the vandalism and the destruction and the Molotov cocktails and the hatred, spray painted on the sides of these facilities that are funded, by the way, by churches and nonprofits, individuals who care about the sanctity of every single American's human life in America. And yet there's just complete silence on the other side. That's a really sad statement about where we are. And I used to be legal counsel for a number of those care pregnancy centers, and so I speak to this with personal experience. But let me get to the issue of the day. This bill is just another superfluous exercise. This bill is completely and clearly unnecessary. And you know what? The sponsors of this bill know that. They know that we're in a very divisive time in the country, and they're doing this anyway. This bill is not only unnecessary, it's more of the same. It's yet another effort to delegitimize the Supreme Court. And as Ms. Jordan explained, they've been doing that in earnest. I mean, not only did Senator Schumer go to the steps of the Supreme Court and infamously call down the whirlwind on Justices Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, and by the way, it led to an assassination attempt, a planned assassination of Justice Kavanaugh, all the lawless protests on their lawns, threatening their children, doxing the addresses of Supreme Court justices' children. It's just unconscionable. It's against the law, plain letter of the law, and yet crickets from the other side. They want to delegitimize the court. They tried to pack it. They want to put 4 liberal justices on the court because they're concerned about the conservative majority right now. It's a lawless approach, a lawless response to the lawlessness of the radical left. And so this is another effort to delegitimize the Supreme Court. It's also a continued disregard, utter and total disregard for the regular order in this body. And I'll explain in just a moment why that's so perilous in a situation like this, with a bill like this. It's also more desperation to focus on anything other than their policy failures, which Mr. Jordan articulated here a few moments ago. Nonetheless, there's this bill before us today. And clearly it is about simple fear-mongering. This is a partisan bill to make partisan arguments and to run ads in an election cycle. And you know why we say that? Because it's very clear, as Mr. Jordan said, in the Dobbs opinion, which supposedly precipitated all this, it's clear if you read the opinion that this is not only an unnecessary piece of legislation, but it's divisive and misleading, and they know it. Because why? Anybody can read the opinion for themselves. Justice Alito wrote the majority opinion, of course, and he clarified. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I used to litigate cases about the Constitution and what it means and how it should be applied. I did that for 20 years before I got to Congress. Scarcely is there ever language this clear written into a Supreme Court opinion. But let me give you the quote again in case anybody missed it, in case you didn't see it or you didn't want to see it. Justice Alito said in the majority opinion, quote, "And to ensure that our decision is not misunderstood or mischaracterized, we emphasize that our decision concerns the constitutional right to abortion and no other right." He continues, "Nothing in this opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion," unquote. Everybody hear that? I'll just say that again. Nothing in this opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. You know why? Because abortion is a unique area of the law. Abortion is about taking the life of another unborn person, another person. And so the court recognized that that's different and distinct, and everybody knows that. Everybody recognizes that, even Justice Clarence Thomas, who they have worked so hard to demonize. If you look at page 119 of the opinion, in fact, would you turn in your hymnals to page 119? Turn to that opinion right there. You can see it for yourself. He said, quote, Justice Thomas said, quote, the court's abortion cases are unique, and no party has asked us to decide whether our entire 14th Amendment jurisprudence must be preserved or revised. Thus, I agree that, quote, he quotes Justice Alito, nothing in the court's opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. You know what? That language is so clear, anybody in this country can read that and understand, obviously, plainly what that means. Every civic student, every child. But apparently, our friends on the other side don't like that language, or they don't want to see it. So they manufactured this crisis, this demeaning, divisive debate, trying to reopen a Pandora's box that no one has opened except the Democrats. This is crystal clear. We ought to take a moment to remember, too, what did not happen after the Obergefell ruling, which did happen after the Dobbs ruling. Did anybody harass Justice Kennedy at his home after Obergefell was handed down? No. Did conservatives and those who adhere to the Judeo-Christian heritage of the country and evangelicals and Catholics, did anybody vandalize businesses to promote their own viewpoints? Absolutely not. Did Republicans call to abolish the filibuster and add justices to the court? No, because we respect the institutions of this nation. But that is exactly what we're seeing from the left. A death threat on a justice, endless protests outside the homes of the justices, threats on their children, threats to pack the court. Listen, we live in an extraordinarily divided time, and reopening this policy, which is under no threat of any legislative or judicial body anywhere, seems more like an attempt by Democrats to stoke fear before the November elections rather than bring the country together. Man, we could use an effort to bring the country together right now. To that end, since the Democrats refuse to discuss what Americans are most concerned with, I'll just take just one moment, since we have the moment here, to walk through the failures of the Democrat policies. Quick summary, won't take long on it, but I've been doing town halls back in my state of Louisiana, and I can tell you what the people are concerned about. They're concerned about soaring prices at the grocery store and the gas pump and their mortgages. They're concerned about uninhibited illegal immigration at the border, utter lawlessness that threatens the very sovereignty and safety security of our country. They're deeply concerned about rising crime in our cities. They're concerned about the stunning incompetence at the most basic functions of government from the Biden administration. These are what I'm hearing back home as I travel the district, holding town halls and talking to constituents. And you know what? Those constituents sent us here, the voters, the people, sent us here to be their representatives, to work on their behalf, to work on behalf of them and their ability to provide for their families with little government overreach into their lives. From economic failures at home to failures on the border, the Democrats have time and time again refused to work with Republicans on how to address the issues at hand. And you know what? Today's just another example. It's just more of the same. Here we go. From one vote on an unnecessary bill that is only being used as a distraction from those failures that I referenced, to a vote on a spending bill that will only make those failures worse. You know, I mentioned part of the problem here, too, is the Democrats are rushing this bill to the floor outside regular order. I mean, they just completely defied regular order. They released the text for this bill only hours before its consideration in the Rules Committee last night. Democrats have held no legislative hearing, no markups on this bill. We serve on the Judiciary Committee. This would have been within our jurisdiction. Didn't bother to bring it to a committee. I mean, I remember from civics class they taught us that this is how a bill becomes a law. You go through the process. You go through the committee. We shouldn't even teach that to kids anymore because it doesn't happen here anymore. But you know what? That recklessness and that carelessness and that defiance of the rules and order and tradition here has real consequences, because one of the consequences in the language of this bill, just one by way of example, is on page 3 of this private right of action clause. I mean, it raised a lot of eyebrows. We didn't have time to analyze that and debate it and thoughtfully talk about that approach. Would that declare open season on religious persons and institutions? I mean, I don't know. It's a question a lot of people are asking today, scratching their heads, but again, we had no opportunity to delve into that, to talk about it, debate it, nothing. And so they present this bill and they drop it on the country. And again, I just would reiterate, I mean, in summary, people ask us back home, you know, there's lots of problems with things that are going on there, but this particular bill, what's the problem? I just summarize it by saying it's unnecessary, it's divisive, and it's misleading. And what's worse is that the proponents of the legislation know that. I would yield back the balance of my time to Mr. Jordan.